Welcome, everyone. This is yet another episode of Disruption Talks, but this time we're slightly flipping the script, and instead of having an external guest, we are speaking with our own so competent team members at Netguru. And out of the almost 1,000 people at Netguru, today our guests are Jinder, Patryk, and Paweł. And whilst I usually give my guests a little bit of introduction, I think in this case it would be great if everybody gave a line about themselves. I'll be the moderator as always, but otherwise the experts here. Jinder, let's start with you.
Thanks very much, Philip, for that wonderfully warm intro. So I'm Jinder. I lead the innovation consultancy here at Netguru. And the topic of prototyping is very important to me. I'm very excited to discuss it, especially with Patryk and with Paweł.
Patryk?
I'm senior consultant of research and development, and basically I'm taking care of implementing rapid prototyping and our other R&D offering.
And Paweł, last but not least.
Hi guys, my name is Paweł. I work in Netguru for almost 5 years as of now. I'm part of R&D department, doing all stuff connected with web and all other cool stuff.
Okay, so the topic of today's talk is most common mistakes in validating digital products, so directly connected to rapid prototyping. But since the reason of Netguru's existence and the R&D department in Netguru's existence is that we want to be able to guide and help and assist our clients, we're looking at innovative companies or companies that want to be innovative, right? So perhaps a simple question, but let's make sure that everybody has the same understanding. What is the role of R&D in innovative companies? I'm throwing up this ball in the air and somebody please grab it.
So basically R&D here in Netguru is about helping with experimentation for people, for our clients. So basically if client comes with an idea, we help them try to get the most of this idea, make from it business case, then try to research topics if there are some advanced technology or something, and in the end create a prototype that they can validate with users, show to investors, and just verify is it going to work. Because basically we are in innovative environment and we have pretty hard stuff to do. So in short, I would say R&D is making impossible possible.
Okay. Any other
From my side, I would add that a lot of companies, a lot of clients that come to Netguru want to create some cool stuff, but do not know how to get from this point of having an idea to final validated final product with market fit. They have a lot of ideas what will and what would work on the market, but in practice there are a lot of situations when market is somewhere else and market fit is somewhere else than they think, and we are here to validate some of ideas and help them to get to that point.
All right,
I would like to add one perspective very quickly, right? So the how the R&D guys can help us and how they do help us is when we kind of think about the external constraints to innovation, we think about industry, so things like regulation, we think about societal acceptance, and then technology. And when we are devising the best solutions for our clients, we like to work with as few constraints as possible. And what these guys really bring to the table as well is an understanding of the capabilities of some of these technologies and how we can develop the correct solutions and find the right technology to serve that purpose. And this is what the R&D team and Netguru also helps us to achieve.
And Jinder, I'm going to throw this back at you because, sorry, gents, I know that Jinder, for a fact, has worked at product companies. I'm not that familiar with your past, so feel free to chip in, but I'm going to start with Jinder. Difference between R&D in product companies and Netguru. Netguru is a service-oriented company. We help out product companies. So what's the drill here when you compare our R&D department working with product companies versus product companies departments, in general?
Very good question. And I'm not entirely sure if my answer is going to be the difference between product and service, or just the sheer fact of what's the difference from 10 years ago to today, right?
Both.
So I would say it's that understanding of we try to understand the challenges faced and what the best solution would be and how technology can enable that solution. What we used to do in the past is, and I will go to the idea of chatbots, as we've had conversations about those. This is a great technology. How can we use it? Now, obviously, we don't want to follow that build it and they will come model. And it's something that we do not follow at Netguru. What we try to understand is the full capabilities of technologies and just have an understanding of that within our consulting teams and our solution designers. And then being able to identify how different technologies can come together to allow us to solve that challenge at hand.
Okay. So just dropping some stats and numbers here. R&D spending worldwide is $2 trillion annually. Because advanced technology reduces risks, it gets you stuff done faster, optimizes processes in terms of how much effort they take, or all of these things basically are supposed to increase your revenue, right? So do you have some examples that you'd like to share of exactly when that happened in a company? It doesn't have to be at Netguru. It's great if it is, but of course, maybe you have some of your favorite R&D examples that, someone wakes you up in the middle of the night, they tell you, listen, favorite R&D example, go. What do you say?
I'm going to hand that over to the guys.
Yeah, I have one pretty cool example that I like to share. It's like click and collect that we did as a rapid prototyping in Netguru. So basically, the COVID came up and we needed like a solution to quickly like click and collect the stuff. And basically, you need to make it fast because like the pandemic, everything is approaching. There's many huge companies that are developing their own, and basically you need like in 1-2 months something to validate, is your idea going to work? And I believe like click and collect was the best example because we cut off like most of the features because they are not relevant, like shopping lists, saving products for later and so on. You just needed like product listing, the cart, ordering, and see where to pick it up basically. And I think this is like the best example of using like rapid prototyping because you went quickly from idea to have like click and collect to getting the prototype that we can validate in the market. And basically, I think this is like the strong point for like making these prototypes experimentation because you make quick iterations. You don't spend like a half a year or something on developing like MVP, but you do it like in 2 months and you have like quick feedback what to do next basically.
Paweł?
And from our Netguru internal stuff, I would say we have a so-called Bob the Bot, and this is really cool virtual assistant. And in my perspective, a lot of companies can benefit from having software that automates stuff for them. But when it comes to buying licenses, you have to deal with and use software that was created by someone else. So this is our internal tool, first of all. Second of all, we started creating a lot of modules, a lot of plugins, so-called, in order to deliver values to our company. Like we gather feedbacks from our internal staff. We help planning. We help planning trips in order to not to make people to follow some legal stuff, just to automate stuff. And we do a lot. We create a lot of small features that will speed up and automate really repetitive work, and it works really great for our company.
Mm-hmm. I can add one thing here because I was using Bob today even to get some business trip, and it really optimizes the processes. So basically, I didn't need to look through the Confluence page, like find materials, how to book a trip, business trip, but I just type in Bob I want a business trip, and basically I get proper form, and like I quickly make a tickets and everything, and it was propagated to other parts of the company. So especially I think in big companies, they can benefit such a virtual assistants to like quickly optimize processes to like shorten the path for people.
So
Definitely. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was going to say that the guys brought up some very good examples, and I'm a big fan of the click and collect approach that they undertook. And if I was saying outside of Netguru, what are the examples I've seen of R&D that I actually really, really like and I am in awe of every time I see it, is probably something like OpenIDEO, where it's that idea of how do we solve social problems or wicked problems. And rather than trying to attack this from a few minds, it's about bringing the power of the crowd, experts in their fields, whether it's engineers, designers, R&D specialists, whatever it might be, but people coming together and bringing their varying perspectives to try and tackle the same problem. So you undertake a lot of learning straight away, because one of the first approaches we normally look to uncover is that idea of the knowledge in the room, right? Let's generate our assumptions before we validate or invalidate those. But something like OpenIDEO, when you utilize the power of the crowd, and the crowd is tens of thousands of people, that knowledge in the room is greatly increased, and we can reduce a number of assumptions straight away into knowledge. So that would be one model that I would say I'm a big fan of.
And I wanted to say that Bob the Bot, of course, from my perspective, which is a definitely non-technical perspective, I can see the value without understanding the technology, because what Bob the Bot does, it's interdepartmental animal, Bob the Bot. So Bob, I love you a lot, because Bob helps us out with arranging sales, which of course they have to be ticketed. They have to work through Jira, and perhaps salespeople versus Jira is not a fair fight. But when we have Bob in the ring on our side, basically talking to Jira the way that Jira needs to be spoken to, and also speaking to us as the non-technical people, this is one of the examples across how it can basically bridge the gaps and make sure that we don't annoy technical people with asking, hey, can you put a ticket in Jira, or trying to teach us how to use tools, but instead, let's find a way around this, save everybody time and the hassle, and just let people focus on their actual work. Okay, flip it. Bad examples of R&D, or improper R&D, or basically not following the process.
I'm not sure if I have a specific example, but what I can say is not undertaking R&D, not undertaking prototyping and building on assumptions is one of my biggest pet peeves, right? It's, yes, you might have a wonderful idea, you may have validated it with your group of friends, etc. That's not enough, right? And you end up in certain traps, like the sunk cost fallacy. I've pumped in 10,000, so I'm going to keep going and keep putting money in, and it will eventually work. That's the kind of thinking sometimes. So I would say the bad side is not undertaking these processes to start with. But over to Pavel and Patryk, because I'm sure they will have some wonderful examples.
Yeah, I have like two. One I mentioned already, like going straight into developing like 6-month MVP and putting a lot of money, as Jinder mentioned, in some product that may fail or succeed or anything, instead of making these short iterations that I mentioned earlier with click and collect. And the second thing is basically if you want to make like R&D in your product company, it will cost a lot, because it requires a lot of knowledge, like technical. We need a lot of consultants from finance, from retail, or any other area, basically. And it's easier, I think, to get us. So we have everything basically in Netguru, every kind of knowledge, every kind of specialist. And basically we have this holistic approach that we can like leverage these things. Basically you give us your employees, and we are giving our employees, and basically together we can like make anything. Basically it's pretty easy.
Yeah, so I have, I think, two examples. First of all, the product that where client came to us and wanted to create a product that will allow hotels guests to give feedback to hotel owners. And getting feedback is fairly simple and straightforward thing. You just give few sentences in many different forms. You can achieve that by having different forms. But owners of the idea thought that, okay, we can build MVP, big MVP, in order to get.
Doesn't sound like an MVP already, Pavel.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, not understanding what MVP, most viable product, is. And the development lasted for about 8 months or something. It included a lot of extremely complicated features, and in the end there was no market fit for that, and probably few people use it from the beginning to the end. And there were a lot of obstacles, a lot of misconception about how people give feedback and so on. So this is one thing. And another thing is corporate trip planner. So client came to us and wanted to have this virtual assistant that will allow employees to plan their trip from office 1 to office 2 using taxi driving and planes. And long story short, in the end, like 10 people used it on production on the daily basis. And comparing to this big, massive budget that was invested in that, it was really bad output. So without having validation is sometimes it's end like this.
And that's quite a common issue that arises, Philip. So you asked me about product companies and service companies, and what Pavel actually described there is really well. It's this understanding of what the MVP is and what its intended purpose is. An MVP should be thought of as that idea of, that's your lean approach, that's your build, your measure, your learn before you iterate, before you pivot. But there's also this misconception that it's, the foundations, and you're just going to keep adding different features and different functionalities to it as it grows, and not having that purpose of learning from the market in as Patryk highlighted within that click and collect approach. You highlight what's needed, you learn, and then you develop on top, or you pivot altogether. But there is this misconception of an MVP just being a foundation and we will build on top of it.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting major I threw a birthday party and nobody came vibes, essentially, when you're telling me about somebody spending so much money and time and then basically nobody came. So, it's also there's also an emotional side to this that needs to be recognized, right? I mean, if you're a product person, it's not just about the numbers lost or just financial KPIs that suffer. It's also that this protects people from potentially career damaging decisions or things that could potentially impact your mental health if this was supposed to be your life.
Philip,
now, yeah,
I would say that there is we can distinguish creating MVP by few people. I mean, owners. There are a few people that are owners of the idea versus big companies that come to us and say, let's create MVP together. Because people outside the companies, owners, like 1 or 2 people, really think about MVP in the more correct way, instead of let's build let's use whole departments for building MVP, let's have timeline for that. And I know a lot of companies that created MVP over the weekend. So this is something, of course it depends on the scale of the idea, but the thing is that the misconception about what Jinder said before, is really, really massive in terms of different companies' size.
And just to add to what Pavel's saying is as well, we might use the terminology here of MVP, and that's because it's kind of an accepted practice and accepted terminology. But what we try and build is what we would commonly refer to as MVLP, but it's more of a mouthful. So it's not just the features and the functions, but that emotional connection you spoke about. So it's that idea of minimum viable and lovable product. So it's not just about developing a list of features and then just letting it free on the market. It's about understanding your users and creating something that's ideally adds value and is something that solves a problem, a pain for them.
So I wanted to ask you our following question in terms of what are the ways of validating a new product idea, but we actually have an audience question that builds that question slightly apart. Sebastian asks, what do you think is needed to make the path from idea to MVP easier for entrepreneurs? Is there any guideline that you recommend? And I think this is exactly what we wanted to talk about in this question. So what are the ways of validating a new product idea, the correct ways? I'm guessing there's several.
So I would read the question slightly differently, right? So it's the idea of taking an idea all the way through to an MVP, right? So it's not just a prototyping, and there is a reason. I'm hoping Pavel and Patryk agree with me. There is a reason that prototyping in the majority of frameworks that we use in strategic design ends up in that fourth stage, right? So when we start something, we normally have that idea, but it's it's more of a could be, and it's that idea of assumptions, right? So normally what we want to start with, and the kind of frameworks we utilize here at Netguru, is we want to discover, we want to understand and empathize with the current market and understand the what is situation. From that, we would normally move into gathering all this data, synthesizing it, and taking those learnings in order to define the challenge at hand before we move into that idea of the development of ideas. And once again, here, we want to be able to map out our assumptions, our hypotheses to test. And then we would move into that idea of delivery or demonstration of the idea, which is where the experiment plan comes in, where the prototypes come in, and certain objectives, etc. And we validate, invalidate as we go along. And by the end of this process, we are less of a could be and more of a should be, and we've turned our assumptions into knowledge.
And I can take, I think, the second part of this question. Is there any guideline that you can recommend? Basically, there are many guidelines depending on what you want to achieve and what kind of MVP. I would say I'm a pretty practical guy, and I was thinking what we can do in R&D to make such a guideline. So basically, when we start with idea, we propose like a hackathon to just generate like business cases, what we can do basically with this idea. When we have like business cases, we can go further with some design sprint. So for example, we have R&D sprint where we investigate like what are the solutions, what are the technologies, and so on. And at this stage, we have like everything like from business side covered, I believe. And going further, we can go like 2-3 directions, like for researchers, like research individual topics, like in pretty quick way. And after all, go with prototyping, like rapid prototyping, create prototype, show to users, investors. And I believe the whole like innovation journey, I like to call it, is like taking 2-3 months, depending on the case. And for me, this is like the guideline that I propose to clients mostly.
So similar to Patryk, it is the idea of defining your experiment map. So that those topics, those areas that you need to understand and dig deeper. And then I suppose one of those ideas is the mistakes of prototyping. And prototyping in the wrong fidelity can also be a hindrance. So, for example, overdeveloping your UI, and people are judging the UI, therefore, and not necessarily the functionality or the features, etc., or the user journey. And there's a number of assumptions, and riskiest assumptions especially, we like to test very early on. So that idea of paper prototyping is also an option for us, so that when we do go to the idea of more of a technical or a rapid prototyping that will have elements of design and development, we are more confident in the kind of dependencies that existed before that, right? So once we move into that phase of higher fidelity, a number of assumptions would have been tested and would allow us, therefore, to understand we're on the right path, or understand we needed to pivot before we went down this route.
Yes, and according to what Patryk said about the journey, I think this is ideal world situation when client comes to us and say, okay, I have an idea, help me to work it out. But from our experience, there are a lot of clients that come to us on a different stage. Like if client, for example, is not sure if his idea will work, we skip to the research phase. Yeah, if the client has all the scope that he worked on his side, we don't challenge it. Yeah, but because client should, I believe, and knows clients know their product enough, and then we give them an opportunity to work with us on rapid prototyping. So our offer, complex offer, depends on clients' needs. From the idea to prototype is journey, but we can work on many different stages alongside with the client.
And just one thing to follow up to what Paweł was saying, and it's Paweł, you will forgive me, but Philip knows one of my favorite things is to try and find areas to disagree, right? So I wouldn't say it's necessarily the idea that we don't challenge them. I think it's the idea of when the evidence is there, we won't challenge them. And one of the things we're in the process of releasing at the moment is this idea of a Netguru product confidence score. And what we do here is we go through various areas of product design. So we would look at things like strategic alignment, opportunity areas, but then the idea of risk reduction. So that idea of desirability, feasibility, viability, and adaptability of the product. And our job, I suppose, in the consultancy team is to understand the evidence and to understand the quality of that evidence, and then to give it a confidence score, whether we green light it for design development or whether we believe it needs to go into a form of learning, i.e. prototyping, or even back further to research and development.
Sure. Yeah. If we see that materials that the client come to us are valid, like you said, then we go forward. But we sometimes challenge as well.
So I want to take it here because we've discussed rapid prototyping a bit. We spoke about what it is. It's finding a market fit, proving the technology. We know who is it for. It would be perhaps good to hear from you, gents, the differentiation. I'm a client with a low budget. I'm a client with a big budget. How differently would you approach me? Because, with big budgets, not a problem, right? Low budgets, how do we create?
From the consultative point of view, what we would look at is how can we quickly prototype. So we would look at what are the tests, what are the experiments that we need to do, and a lot of these could come in a very rough form, because not always do we need that kind of lean approach, and we can end up doing things like paper prototyping to get a lot of information. But we can also undertake the problem area, utilize something like the Netguru product confidence score, and utilize that in a research methodology, so that we can turn assumptions to knowledge much earlier on, and then go through the process of rapid prototyping.
Mm-hmm. To be honest, I won't distinguish big budget, low budget, because we try to make it in the same way for any company with the same pricing and so on. And basically, we want to focus on this research, experiment. We want to experiment. Is it going to work? Do you find your customers and so on using our prototype? And this is the key. And basically, after all, if you have big budget, you can continue experimentation and so on, of course. But for low budget companies, they have opportunity. If it works, they can go further. If not, they can pivot, start checking another market, another idea, and so on.
So just to say that Patryk actually slightly disagreed with me, and actually Patryk's 100% right. The whole point of prototyping is that it's something that limits the need for such large budgets, right? And it is the best option, regardless of whether you're a big company or a small company, to ensure you're building the right thing.
Okay. To be honest, I was hoping for some creativity if I'm like a really low budget. I know we have the same pricing, Patryk, I'm in sales, I know that, but I'm looking more at like
we could even utilize different approaches, right?
I'm just before funding. I don't have much bootstrap. What can I do to prepare myself that once I have the funding, I could engage in some R&D with Netguru? Like, what are the good practices that you
maybe get better at your elevator pitch, Philip?
Personally, or
we can help you, Philip. Just contact us.
Yeah, let's jump on a call after this. Listen, we have a audience question that's connected to what we wanted to talk about in terms of knowledge of what users need. Paweł asks, what is your answer to the popular faster horses by Henry Ford myth? I know it's BS, okay, and Ford was stubborn and messed out his company, but how to explore and test future habits before they are adopted? So in other words, how did Steve Jobs know that iPhone won't be a flop, but the phone that everybody has right now?
Interesting question. So it struck a nerve with me, that question, because I didn't know it was a myth until about 10 years ago. So I used to use that line a lot, right? And I suppose there's another example I look to switch to every so often. And it's this idea, I think it was Sony Walkmans, and I'm not sure if Patryk remembers those. But basically, they did a lot of user research on the idea of the sports Walkman being yellow. And everyone who they interviewed said, yeah, great idea. At the moment, all Walkmans are black. A yellow one would be amazing. And at the end of their interviews, they thanked everybody and said, hey, take a free gift. And there was a table of yellow Walkmans and a table of black Walkmans. Everyone took the black Walkman, right? So even though everyone said what a wonderful idea it is. And it's that idea that I suppose, there's two ways to look at that line, Paweł. One is they expressed an issue, and the issue was speed. So it's not necessarily looking at, if I ask users, they would tell me the wrong information. That's because you have this, us as humans have this behavior where we need to categorize everything. And the idea of, hey, they want a faster horse, that's my bot's faster horse. But there was an issue. The issue was speed. They want to get to their destinations faster. So that allows you then to solve that challenge rather than the faster horse, which, I don't know how you train a horse to be faster, what diet they need to be on. And then the second way to kind of look at it is when you research it, it's most often cannot be done in singularity. And that idea of surveys, focus groups, there are inherent issues with these. People have a tendency to either have something like the bandwagon effect or aspirational behaviors in surveys. But the idea is that they're very good tools to get quantitative data, but they need to be part of a complete research plan, right? You need to have a full understanding and not take things on assumption. And even if you do, you still need to test and validate that before you can take it as knowledge.
I want to add what Jinder said about the Walkmans. Basically, paper is accepting everything. So on paper, like yellow Walkman was great. And what I really like in prototyping is we are giving this opportunity to show people like yellow and black Walkman and see what they are really deciding. Because on paper, they may say, yeah, it's cool. But in reality, if they have like this prototype, they can use it. They will like use them properly, what they really think about it. So this is what I really like with prototyping and this practical approach, rather doing everything on paper and thinking what's gonna work or not.
I gotta say, because actually I had a couple memories connected to Sony and their devices. When you actually Google Sony weird R&D, there are articles with like 15 examples of what they created. I remember that they had this huge insistence on creating their own proprietary data formats that couldn't be used anywhere else. On the PlayStation Portable, you had UMD discs On the Discman, they decided to make it smaller by creating their own mini disc format. And they even went as far with some assumptions that only paper could take, that if they want to decrease the form factor of the Walkman, they decreased it, but the CD was sticking out. So you would essentially have a smaller device, correct, with a spinning chainsaw-like thing that I'm not sure if you would keep in your pocket or anywhere else, but yeah, we'll throw it in the comments because it's a very interesting one. That
Yeah, there was Walkman with CD sticking out.
Yeah, so I'm 26 and I remember all of these products. So I'm curious what else was even before that. So what happens after rapid prototyping? We've done it right. You've done it correctly. Everything by the book. You listen to Jinder. You listen to Patryk. You listen to Paweł. What's next?
Patryk, please go ahead. Paweł, I hand over to you guys at this stage, right?
So basically, we have the prototype. It's working. It's great. It's gonna bring us the money. So it's time to create a roadmap and like another steps to create the MVP, the product, and so on. And this is state we have a like validated idea. We have like business described. We have prototype that is working. And from this stage, it's really important for consultants to help the client create proper roadmap, because client will be like excited. It's working. I'm getting money basically. And this is the step to like hold your horses and focus on the roadmap and small steps to just not lose the point why the prototype was working, because we will overwhelm with features and so on. We'll try to like add everything there, and we need only probably this one core features to like lean on the product. Basically, I like what Facebook recently did to the Messenger application. They removed all the games and everything from the main application. Basically, right now, if you open the Messenger, you have only the chats and the people, nothing more. And like a year or two ago, there was like a games and everything added. And this is what I would like to avoid with a client, not adding too much stuff, because Messenger is not about the games, it's about talking with people. And we really need to focus on the core like features of the application still, even in further product.
And just to add to what Patryk said, the reason you don't want to go to the prototype stage with loads of features to test and loads of functionality to test is you will end up with a correlative understanding, right? You won't understand that idea of true cause and effect, and that's what you need to understand, right? You won't understand why there is loads of uptake on certain parts if you have 50 features. You don't understand what's the relevant one necessarily, right? And it's also speed to market. That's the other big reason that we want to try to reduce the amount of features. So we want to learn in real world environments. And that idea of build, measure, learn is in essence our output of the prototyping stage. And that idea of, scaling that release, that go to market, increasing the eyes on your product eventually.
From my perspective, I would add a very important thing, which is measuring, because many people forget that they should rely on users and rely on their behavior in the app, rely on many different stuff that can be measured, like doing a lot of A/B tests, doing performance tests, doing many different tests that will answer and validate their approach. Because we can add 50 or 5 new features into the product, but they must be measured. Founders must know, and their business department must know how that impacted the product. And this is something that people can omit, because we started to learning about our users, and we know them, so probably they need that, but they need those new features. But basically it can be wrong approach in terms of users' needs if some numbers aren't registered.
I also have one question I would like to ask Pavel and Patryk while we have them in the same room. Is when we talk about the mistakes of prototyping, right? There's quite a few out there. Do you guys have one that you come across most commonly, or one that just inside hurts or frustrates you the most?
For me, it's the scope. The scope is always the problem because like clients want the most they can like get. Instead of focusing on the quality, they focus on quantity of the features. And basically you can add like one feature and it's gonna work still the same, like you have like 3 4, but they are disturbing user. And basically for me the scope is the most common problem, like they are not understanding what the application is really about. If you are making shopping application, the like add product to cart and buy it is done. If you are creating chat, you need only like the messaging part, nothing more basically. And you can like extend in future with some reactions, like putting videos, stories, and so on. But with the prototyping, the core is like to test, experiment with one feature basically. Is it going to work? Is it going to sell?
I agree with Patryk. What I would add is not understanding users to the core of their behavior, because we can create chat, but if users do not need it, then numbers will be low. If we create, I know, some VR application and users do not know how to use it because they do not have this need, then there will be problem for founders. So this understanding, I would say.
So I do have one follow-up question. So I agree the scope can be very frustrating sometimes. What about those industries or those organizations? And I have a tendency to think of enterprise financial institutions who won't prototype openly to the market often, right? What would you do in that kind of a circumstance then?
Basically they are creating like closed prototypes for certain users. Basically they have own group and they are experimenting with their own people, and we can also provide like such a prototyping. It's not a problem. It's basically, I believe, with the bigger company gets, the bigger problem with the scope is. And basically the scope for such a financial big company will be like huge, and this is like still the most common problem. Even not like how to find users, how to find market, and so on, because it's always possible to get proper like user group and everything, but problem is what to do for them.
Cool. So I'm going to add my one thought on, because I agree the scope is the most common mistake I come across, but I'm also going to add one I've started to notice creep in the last 5-10 years, right? And pointing my gun firmly at entrepreneurs, and it's that fear of validation. So that idea of, I have a wonderful idea, I don't want to necessarily speak to users because in my mind it's a great idea, and I don't want people to tell me it's not, right? I'm not sure if you guys have come across that, but it's that idea of attachment to your idea, right? Being overly attached to it, and therefore not willing to accept the feedback that comes in, or not utilizing the feedback in a correct way to actually pivot or shape the future product.
Yeah, basically during like R&D sprints, we discover like from one idea multiple approaches. So basically, if one approach is not working, one prototype is not, we can always pivot it to something that client still likes, love it, and he not losing like the whole idea, everything, but he's losing like part of it because it was not working. The approach was bad, maybe the idea in general is bad, but we can like shift to other areas and still start working on towards something that is going to work in future.
Yeah, and what you Jinder said, I agree, because the product and project for collecting feedback was that case. Yeah, we talked to the client and said, listen, you don't need to build a full-fledged product for collecting feedback. You can call clients and ask them, oh, what did you like? Or send them form in some Google form, and say, no, we need that because we want clients to feel special. We want they to have this cool user experience because the UI and UX will be so special, so innovative, and they will feel great. But we ask client, okay, but what if users do not need that? No, it's not that, not understanding. They will love it. They will love it. We are sure. And in the end, it was a kind of problem without users in the app, more or less.
Yes, I share your experience and your pain that clearly came through that.
And the idea for the product was awesome. It was a big need on the market for such thing, but done in a wrong way, executed in a wrong way, will be pain in the end.
In the end, they focused on feedback, but not in the right
but too late maybe.
But feedback when your fingers are still in your ears, right?
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
not taking it on board in order to shape.
Pain in the end. I'm stealing that. It's a PG rated. It's just like saying, instead of Jesse Pinkman's original line, science baby, right? And speaking of science, this is exactly what resonated when Jinder was speaking, because I think that's the simplest front on which you can get most people. Most people did attend university. High chance that some of them attended a Bachelor of Science, not a Bachelor of Arts. And with anything concerning science, you would have the null hypothesis, right? That you're trying to debunk, trying to find correlations, trying to have a control group, trying to have an uncontrolled group. And actually, that is the best metaphor, the best simile for the logic that should convince anybody. As in, if you introduce too many things, you will have zero idea what caused what. You will be unable to conduct this experiment, because what this is essentially is a practical but still scientific experiment where you're trying to discover correlation and causation and extrapolate that. So I think personally that if you want to sort of strip it of everything technology, everything product, and just boil it down to the concept, the logic, the principles, that way is the easiest. If you throw it back at the client or at the person, anybody who's trying to say, let's put more, let's see more, let's give more, let's have messages with basketballs, just like Messenger did it, right? And just say, okay, how confident do you think that you'll be able to tell yourself which of the findings that we will have boxes and boxes of is the right one and is the source one? So, gentlemen, 50 minutes has passed. I think we have exhausted the topic in its basics. I'm sure we could talk about this for hours on end. And of course, anybody watching, please reach out to either us personally or Netguru, and let's chat about your R&D struggles or successes and how we can relieve you of your struggles or continue your success together. In the meantime, I wanted to invite you to, once again, our Thursday Disruption Talk series with Nat. They're focused around sustainability, and next week's Disruption Talks with Weaver.io. In the meantime, gentlemen, thank you so much for being great guest speakers. Thank you, audience, for your questions. Any last words? Anybody?
Prototype. Make sure you do it.
The headline.
We didn't talk a lot about business value. So yeah, business value first.
Business value first, prototype. And Patryk, do you have maybe one word you'd like to throw to the audience?
Thank you. Just thank you.
Nice one. Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody, and see you very soon on Netguru's social media. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.